So I'm going to go through a mental health and awareness info session. And I'm going to give a bit of an introduction. Next slide. So why am I doing this session? So I studied a Bachelor of Science with a major in psychology, and I'm studying to become a clinical psychologist. I also volunteer for Lifeline Digital, which is a crisis support helpline. And I have a wealth of knowledge about mental health, and I'm really passionate about it. Why are we doing it this week? Next week is Are You OK Day on Thursday, and Wednesday is World Suicide Prevention Day as well. October is also Mental Health Awareness Month, and when I spoke to Namet a few months ago, we discussed having this session because it's really important to talk about mental health. Next. Awesome, cool. So what we're going to go over, do a bit of an overview of mental health, mental illness, a bit of facts and figures, a bit about lived experience, so what it's kind of like to live with a mental health, a mental illness, some cultural stigmas, shifting our perceptions and attitudes towards mental health, and what resources are available as well. Before we start, if anything gets uncomfortable or you get a bit overwhelmed, you're more than welcome to leave. I do hope that you don't. I encourage you to stay. There's not a lot of you today. But I do want to let you know that it is okay. Sometimes it can be a bit triggering, it can be a bit overwhelming, and I completely understand that. Okay, cool. So what is mental health or mental illness? It's not a lot of you. I do have a few questions, but if you kind of know the difference, I'd love to hear from you.
Mental health is just your mental health in general together. Yeah. Illness is a specific thing you have that affects you.
Yeah.
Cool. State of emotions.
Yeah. So your mental health, correct, is your health. Mental illness is more if you have a disorder. So mental health is more like physical health. Mental illness is more, I don't know, any kind of illness that you might have, like diabetes is a physical illness, for example. Next slide, Alex. So this is the World Health Organization definition. So mental health is a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well and work well, and contribute to their community. It is an integral component of health and well-being that underpins our individual and collective abilities to make decisions, build relationships, and shape the world we live in. It is a basic human right and it's crucial to personal, community, and socio-economic development. As the gift says, that's all right. Mental health is health, so you should treat it like that. Cool. What is mental illness? A mental illness or mental disorder, I will say both throughout the speech because they mean the same thing, is a health problem that significantly affects how a person feels, thinks, behaves, and interacts with other people. It is diagnosed according to a standardized criteria. So this is the Australian Department of Health definition. One thing I want to mention is that standardized criteria is usually the Diagnostic Statistics Manual, which is the DSM-5, and that's used globally as well. Just go back 1 second, sorry. So when we're talking about mental illness, it is associated with changes in the brain structure, chemistry, and function. It does indeed have a biological basis, so that's important to remember. Things like your hormones, dopamine, which plays a role in reward center, impacts many body functions such as movement, memory, motivation, mood, attention. Serotonin, which also plays a role in your mood, in your sleep, your digestion, your health overall. And I'll go over a few of the common mental illnesses and disorders a little later. Cool. I do want to touch on well-being because that is obviously always used when you talk about mental health. So well-being is a positive state experienced by individuals and society similar to health. It is a resource for daily life and is determined by social, economic, and environmental conditions. It encompasses your quality of life and the ability of people and societies to contribute to the world with a sense of meaning and purpose. So well-being is more holistic. It's everything, including your physical health and your social health. And whereas mental health is more psychological and emotional. You'll see well-being mentioned in schools. You'll see it mentioned in universities, in workplaces, because they're trying to look at your health more overall, more holistically. Whereas in this specific case, we're going to look a little bit more at mental health. And a lot of self-care is targeted at your well-being. Cool, next. Awesome. Statistics. So I'm going to try and go over these a bit quickly. They can be a bit confronting. 1 in 5 Australians aged 16 to 85 have experienced a mental disorder in the last 12 months. This was updated May 2025, so it's pretty recent data. 43% of Australians will experience a mental disorder in their lifetime. I would honestly argue it's more like 50%, or if not higher. Some people just don't get diagnosed. Some people might not report it. And 3,214 Australians have died by suicide in 2023, which is, go back Alex, sorry, 1 second, which is 8 to 9 people a day, 75% of which are men. So men actually make up the majority. So I'm glad that we have so many boys. Cool, next. That does play a factor. So some more statistics. 720,000 people have died by suicide globally, and it is the third leading cause for young people between 15 and 29 globally as well. When we look at Australian statistics, so the bottom to Australian, 22%, there's a prevalence of depression and anxiety of 22% for young Australians aged 15 to 34, which is higher than 22% for people aged 55 and over. And since 2017, it is actually the most common serious illness for 15 to 34-year-olds, and that's depression or anxiety. So it's actually beat out asthma for being the most common. And we all know someone who has asthma, right? So that's how common it is. Next slide, thank you. Awesome. So most common mental disorders. So the first 3, anxiety, mood disorders, and substance use or substance abuse, they're for all ages. So anxiety, this is in the last 12 months, was at 17%, with females averaging higher. Anxiety is an emotion characterized by worry and physical symptoms of tension in which an individual anticipates impending danger, catastrophe, or misfortune. That's basically your fight or flight response being triggered when it doesn't really need to be. For example, me coming tonight, I was very anxious. And there are different types of anxiety disorders, generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety, and your phobias also are considered anxiety. When we look at mood disorders, 8% of Australians have a mood disorder in the last 12 months. That is, your depression and bipolar. It disturbs your mood to the point where it becomes difficult to function in relationships or at work. If we're talking depression, we're talking really low moods. Bipolar is a lot of ups and downs. So really, really high moods and then really, really low moods to the point where you're not really functioning well. Substance abuse, that was pretty obvious, 3%. Use of illegal drugs or alcohol in excess, and the use of pharmaceutical, whether it's over the counter or prescription, in ways other than it's intended, that's at 3%. Males are a lot more likely to have substance abuse. If you're wondering why the numbers don't add up to the 20% that I mentioned earlier, it's because you can have more than one disorder at once, and they tend to come together. So if you have a mood disorder, you might also have anxiety, or you might also have a substance abuse. ADHD, so I included this one because it's pretty common in kids, ages 4 to 17, 7%. In the last 12 months. It includes a combination of persistent problems such as difficulty paying attention, hyperactivity, and impulsive behavior. After ADHD, there is anxiety disorders, also at 7% for children, and major depressive disorder at 3%. Next slide. Was there anything that kind of shocked you? Anything that seemed a bit out of all of it? I think I'm going to touch on why that might not be the case, because that one does come up a lot in our culture, but I will touch on that. I think for a lot of people, the male domination in suicide tends to shock people. 75% is a lot, but that's why we have Men's Mental Health Month. I think it's May. Don't quote me. I'm pretty sure it's May. But there is a whole month dedicated to it, and there are services dedicated to males as well to kind of combat that.
I think the least shocking thing to me was the ADHD.
Yeah, being common.
I think every household pretty much has children that experience ADHD.
Yeah, it's a pretty common one, which is why I wanted to include it. And it is more obvious in boys. Girls tend to be underdiagnosed in ADHD, and they get diagnosed later in life. So if you're feeling like maybe you should have a diagnosis, go check that out. All right, next, Alex, thanks. So I'm just going to go over the mental health continuum. So through life, you'll kind of fluctuate between healthy and reacting, which is also coping, and then maybe you'll go into struggling. Healthy is just normal functioning. Reacting is common and reversible distress. Injured is severe and persistent functional impairment. And then clinical disorder, severe functional impairment. So you're overwhelmed. Common and reversible distress would be, I don't know, you're feeling overwhelmed with schoolwork. You're a bit anxious that you have an assignment due. Severe and persistent functional impairment, that might be on the back of something really traumatic like a divorce or someone's passed away and you kind of, there we go. Okay, cool. Of course we have tech issues. Sounds about right. So severe and persistent functional impairment, so something like a death, you might take a few weeks off work, you might find it really difficult to get back. But if you don't get those emotions and those feelings under control, that's when you'll end up being mentally ill, which is not a bad thing. It's not the be or end all, but prevention and intervention are key. And you can avoid onset altogether if you do catch it early, or you can manage the symptoms better, similar to a physical illness. You know, finding out you have diabetes earlier makes it easier to manage. You can put in the right steps. Cool, next. So what are some signs someone may need help? Your friend or someone that you love. Yeah, no?
Someone just out of a sudden changes their character, or
Yeah.
changes, you find a sudden change
In their behaviour.
Something's not right.
Yeah, exactly. They are.
Self-isolation.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you might swear you can say someone over here, but I don't know what
Yeah, okay, yeah, that was really obvious. Yeah, delusions. Anything else? Okay, cool. Next. So we're going to go over some of them. So I'm going to try and summarize them so we don't go through the full list. This is from a mental health first aid training pack. So sudden or concerning changes in behavior, mood swings or erratic moods, seeming really down or sad, which is a bit of an obvious one. Withdrawal from others, so avoiding. Lack of interest in things they really love. So you see someone who really loves the footy and they stop showing up to games. It's cause for concern. Negative talk about themselves, their life, their future. Oh, my life sucks. I'm going nowhere. Nothing's going my way. Frequent or excessive anger, frustration, or other intense negative emotions. Lots of talking about death and dying, and then also mentions of suicide. Deliberately harming themselves, lost, unsure, hopeless. Lack of interest in work, family, hobbies, sleeping too much, but also sleeping too little. So someone who's staying up a lot. Increased use of alcohol or other substance, confusion, disorientation, disassociating, which is what no one mentioned, seeing things that aren't there, and outward expressions that they're not coping. So that one's really obvious. So if you've got friends who are telling you, I'm not really having a good time right now, that one's the most obvious one. So, 1 second, let me see. Is this slide 16?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So we've covered a lot of information and hopefully you've learned something new and we've looked at the signs and I'll touch on some of the resources towards the end, what you can kind of do where you can reach out. But I want to share a little bit about my lived experience. What's the importance of lived experience? It puts things into perspective. It allows you to actually envision someone that might have gone through something as well. So it's really good for this sort of thing. Next slide. So I think this is pretty accurate. The Inside Out movies were really good at describing feelings in my opinion. So I have generalized anxiety disorder and I got diagnosed in 2022. I kind of did it out of spite. My mum told me to stop diagnosing myself and go get help. So I did. And it can be really hard sometimes. It manifests itself in different ways. Next slide, Alex. Sometimes it's like this, where all I need to do is, for example, go to a new cafe or a new restaurant and I feel like my life is crumbling and falling apart. Sometimes it's, when I started going to the gym, I couldn't go by myself. I couldn't do anything by myself. I had to have someone next to me. She couldn't leave my side. It was really hard. After a few years, as long as she was near me in the gym, it was okay. Now I can go on my own, but it can be very debilitating. COVID did kind of make it worse. I was petrified of going to the post office, which sounds ridiculous, but the whole process and stuff, it was really overwhelming. How do I deal with it? I basically talk to myself and say, why am I like this? I kind of do it by force a little bit. I just put myself in uncomfortable situations and I deal with it. So for example, this session, I volunteered for it and I've been anxious about it for 2 weeks. self-inflicted, but you kind of have to do that to kind of move through it. I rely on my friends. I rely on my parents. I'm very annoying with my parents sometimes, and I make them walk in before me or make calls for me. But they're very helpful. Same with my friends. And I remind myself that the world doesn't revolve around me, and nobody actually cares. And if I'm going to a new cafe, that they're probably happy that I'm coming to spend money, not annoyed at me for coming. And I also see a psychologist as well to kind of support me through it. I think everyone should, even if you don't have a mental illness, it's really helpful, but maybe I'm a bit biased with that one. Does anyone have any questions before we move to the next segment? No? Okay, cool. Let's talk cultural stigma. I'm going through it a bit fast, so if at any point you want me to stop or slow down, just let me know. So stigma, just to define a little bit, is when someone sees you in a negative way because of a particular characteristic or attribute, such as a mental health condition. So what are some of your experiences when you've mentioned or brought up mental health in your family? What have been some of your experiences? If you've mentioned that you're sad, for example. Yeah, with overseas. Yeah. Any other ones?
I feel like it's a good leg up to realise the position you need.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, yeah, of course. Privileged. Yeah. Anyone else?
Depression isn't real.
Depression isn't real. Yeah, anxiety doesn't exist. Some of the ones I've heard, bala depression, bala batikh. What do you have to be depressed about? Look what's happening overseas. The world doesn't revolve around you. That one I do use to my benefit, but that's not really the right response. Don't embarrass or disgrace us in front of the community. It's your phone. It's your social media. That's the whole reason that you're upset. I once mentioned that I sometimes have panic attacks, and someone told me to pray mid-panic attack. I was like, oh, okay. So while I can't breathe, I'll try that one. Thank you. So I find that if it's not physical, it's not really taken seriously until it's something severe like a nervous breakdown, right? Or someone can't go to work, or someone can't pick themselves up. It's a really big problem in our community because you only get to a nervous breakdown when you've been struggling for a while. And the community tend to cover it up and avoid the topic altogether. Like Leanne said, it doesn't exist. What are you talking about? I don't know. I have no idea what you're talking about. So I'm going to cover some things why we kind of do that as a community. And I did research this, and I am going to touch about the denial aspect that it exists overseas. So shame, there's something called courtesy stigma, and it's basically where you get stigma by association. So because my friend is mentally ill, I now have to suffer their negative stigma. And in our communities, families are often to blame for their relative's illness and criticised for being the cause, which comes into that family unit as the driving force. So the family is seen to be what determines how well you are, how physically well you are, how well you do in school. They don't really look at it as the individual. It's all the family's fault. So that also leads to a lot of shame. Reputation, who's going to marry you, especially for women. I actually argue it's more important to know because then you can avoid things like really bad postpartum depression. And concealment. If we keep hiding it and if we keep avoiding it, we're just continuing the cycle, right? Generation after generation, and it helps no one really. The next really big reason is unfamiliar or lack of understanding around the mental health or mental illness. That's obviously a big one. And I want to touch on the denial that it exists overseas. So a lot of people say that when you're overseas, they don't care about their mental health. There's more things, there's bigger fish to fry. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the idea is that you need to fulfill each level of need before you can go to the next one. So you need to fulfill your physiological needs, your water, your food, your shelter, sleep, clothing, before you can focus on safety needs, which is your personal security, employment, resources. That's before you can focus on love and belonging, which is your friendships and your connections. Now, if we look at our families overseas, they're still on physiological. They don't have food. So, yeah, haram, anja, they're there. They can't focus on anything else because they're still here. But if we look at us here, alhamdulillah, we have food and we have shelter and we have opportunities and we have connection. Yeah. So we're here. So we're focusing on our self-esteem. This is when your mental health actually becomes more of a factor. Yeah, Mina.
It's interesting you say that overseas they have a mental, yet they don't show their mental health like we do here.
Yeah.
They have everything that everyone would dream of.
Yeah.
I feel like mental health is on the right.
It's really-
Should be up once. Why is that the case?
It's this. So when you can't focus, so when you're focused on getting food and water and shelter, your physical needs are coming first. There's no time, no capacity, no space to think of anything mental. Even in war, for example, trauma doesn't hit a person until they leave war, until it stops. So if we look at Syria as an example, it's obviously had 14 years of war and what's happening now. But even in that period when the war had kind of stopped, what did they end up having? Financial insecurity. They had no food, they had no jobs, and they were struggling in that sense. So even though the war was over and they were maybe able to process their emotions, they still went backwards because now they're struggling for food. Now they're struggling for jobs and they're struggling for their resources and everything. So the idea is you can't really focus on anything until you have your basics covered. When you look at refugees, Manal, in that example, when they leave war and they come to Western countries and they live in Western countries and their first two needs are fulfilled, when they get to a sense of belonging, love and belonging, they start to feel the sense of connection disconnect. And that's when that becomes a problem and their mental health becomes a problem, apart from whether or not they've suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. So they find it hard to fit in. Yeah.
Okay, so I work at a school, right, and I deal with a lot of young kids who do suffer a lot of mental illness. And when we come across young kids, ADHD or whatever it is, they put it down to trauma, like when they misbehave, trauma. What's their trauma? Parents are getting a divorce or broken homes, whatever it is. But when I'm working with kids that come from war-torn countries like Syria, they seem to be thriving. I don't get that.
It's look, there's a lot of reasons. There's not one reason for anything.
It becomes case by case.
It's case by case, but also
That to me is trauma. But I'm like,
that's definitely trauma.
And it's not misbehaving.
But it is your brain protects you more when you're in the more severe trauma. So when you're actually going through a war, when you're seeing things day in, day out, your brain actually protects you a lot more than if your trauma is quite simple, like your parents getting divorced, which is, pardon?
They get used to it.
They get used to it, yeah. It just becomes a part of their normal life. It's not, a big deal anymore. And because your brain has that protective factor when you're in your fight or flight response, sometimes some traumas seem much bigger than others,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you believe that trauma builds you as a person?
I mean, you can build resilience from trauma, yeah. I wouldn't wish trauma on anyone, depending on the severity of it. But yeah, you can build resilience from trauma and you can become stronger from it.
Yeah.
But it can also, be really debilitating. It can be really hard to live. It makes your life harder.
Or it could end up in cases of like suicide.
And suicide, yeah. And more severe. Substance abuse. Substance abuse is really, really big to deal with it. So really great discussion, guys. Oh, now
Let's elaborate on Manel's. So the children that come from a war-torn country and they're thriving and they're doing so well, could the trauma get them later?
yes.
But could it be as they become an adult
And they understand.
they start to relive the unresolved trauma, like what they've gone through as a child, because they've never had counselling and they've never been looked after with that particular trauma. Could it come up later in life, like when they get married, they're older, they're teenagers?
When they have their own kids.
Could
Yeah.
it affect them later because they haven't actually solved that problem?
Yeah.
It's in the back of their mind, but just life just sort of...
Yeah, definitely. It can come up at any stage in life, not necessarily when they're younger, especially when they're older and they're actually able to comprehend what they went through and what they suffered. But it's the same with any kind of childhood trauma. There's a lot of people that block it out and then they become adults and they try and do some things. They have their own kids and it starts to come back because your brain is consistently trying to protect you and give you little bits and pieces when you can handle it. That's kind of the idea. So yeah, a lot of people, that's spot on. A lot of people do seek therapy later in life for traumas that they suffered when they were young.
I was going to say, like from people I've heard, or just stories online, most counsellors and stuff, they always go back to the root, or how was your childhood? How did you
Exactly.
grow up? And from then they're able
to build it. Yeah. So not to digress a bit, but there's something called schemas, and they kind of build you as an adult. So there's something called like an abandonment schema, which you can kind of not get, but you would have. And it would have happened when you were a child. You know, maybe your mum didn't pick you up from after school care, and you feel like people abandon you. And then that manifests itself as you're older, you know.
Do you believe that mental illness is different when it comes to men and women? But obviously, our biology is different. We function differently.
Yeah, it impacts us differently, because we have different hormones, estrogen, testosterone, they all play a factor in as well. Women, obviously, you know, when you're giving birth and stuff like that, all impacts differently. And males tend to go a bit more towards some disorders than women would. Anxiety is a lot higher in women than it is in men. I would argue it's because men don't realize that they're anxious, but that's a different story. But so is aggressive behavior, conduct behavior, which is when you really can't.
Anxiety for men.
Anxiety.
Depression for men.
No, depression for women, come on.
Depression leads you to die.
Yeah.
Anxiety doesn't lead you to die.
Oh, it can. But anxiety can lead to depression. It can lead to a lot of things, to be unfortunate.
We pass anxiety. Depression.
Okay, no problem. So yeah, that's kind of when people say that it doesn't exist overseas, or when people say to you, you know, your family overseas have it much better than you. It's always good to remember that their needs are different and what they're focused on right now is very different to what you're focused on. So you can't really compare yourself to someone else. Seeking help from traditional means. So because people think it's unfamiliar or they're not sure about it, they go to a sheikh, and they think that, you know, that there's an evil soul that's causing the symptoms. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. If you're comfortable and you want to go to a sheikh, you do that. That's what you want to do to feel comfortable. That's great. But I would also suggest you go see someone Western at the same time. You can always seek 2 forms of support, and it's better to have all your bases covered. Some sheikhs, they think mental health doesn't exist, and that's the reality of the situation. So if you are in that situation, I would suggest seeking both, because it is good to go back to your religion, but you also need to go back to the root cause as well. Stigma delays seeking help. So one of the studies that I looked at is overseas. They found there was a stigma from the actual healthcare providers, and when the families tried to seek help, they were maybe insulted or disrespected, ignored. Yeah. Exactly. You're a Majnooni. You're insane. So I'm like, well, yeah, maybe I am, but this is what I'm doing. I'm trying to get help at least. And then the last one, assumption that doctors cure all. People think you go to a psychologist and you go, fix me, and then you walk out and everything's fixed. It's not the case, unfortunately. Next. Okay, cool. I put this in for you, Noah, specifically. So what ways can we shift our perceptions and our attitudes? How can we kind of change the narrative culturally? Learning more, yeah. Education, yeah. Awareness, yeah. Getting people to talk about it, yeah. Any other ones? Talking to a professional, yeah. Checking in, yeah, definitely.
I think making it norm in our community, like it's not normal to talk about mental illness. Like you said, it's hidden, it's shamed. I think we need to change that.
Yeah, we do.
For our sake and for our kids.
Our kids and our next generation, yeah.
People are afraid. I think there's a fear, especially in our culture, that if you're going to ask for help or you don't want to show that, oh, I've got a weakness, like it's like this, you've got to be perfect.
100%.
Yeah.
It's the same as, you know, someone coming over to your house and you clean every corner of the house in case they happen to go into, you know, your guest bedroom, which they're never going to go in. I know it's Namad. Or they're going to check the top of the fridge. I've never been into a house and checked the top of someone's fridge. But yeah, it's that same concept. You want to project this perfect image. My kids are perfect and I'm perfect and my house is perfect. But that's not the reality of the situation, and it's up to us to change that.
See that online with celebrities and influencers, they try to portray a perfect life, and then as soon as they crumble, people get get shocked. Like,
Yeah,
wow,
they're like, oh my God.
people as well, like,
Yeah.
they go through those things.
Exactly. I mean, I think online culture has shifted a little bit, thankfully. People have gone a bit too far though, and they're trying to, project to have an illness or to glorify it or glamorize it, which is kind of a bit of a cause for concern. But the more awareness, the better. So next slide, Alex. So we touched on all of this. So listening without judgment. What you hear, you keep. It's not for anyone else's ears. You keep it with you. I think that's really important. People be hacky a lot. We love gossip, but it's fine to gossip over someone's dress. But when it comes to stuff like this, if someone's trusting you, then you should respect that trust. Coming together as a community, what we do best is together. Come together, support each other. Someone, starts struggling, help them pick up their kids, help them pick up their chores, whatever they need to do it together as a community. And there might be some inconveniences, but that's what loving someone or caring about someone is. It's a little bit of inconvenience here and there. Increasing education and awareness. So shout out to BaytulHuda for doing this session. It's really important. But also educating yourselves, finding little videos. There's a lot online. There's a lot for your kids as well. Inside Out, again, is a really good example of a movie teaching your kids how to express their emotions, especially boys, and not telling them that boys don't cry. Please never tell a boy child that boys don't cry. Accessing professional help with the family included. So something as well that the study found is that Arabs like to do things together. I actually went to an appointment with my stepmom today. I did translate for her, but I think she would have had me there either way. Take someone you care about with you. If you need to get help, you don't have to go alone. Any therapist, any mental health professional, they're going to understand. Might not be your family, they might be part of the problem. But take a friend, take someone you love, and get that help that you might need. Next slide. Okay, some resources. So you can always talk to someone that you care about, someone that you love. That's obviously a good one. There is a link here, but if you just type that into Google, you'll find it. It's the New South Wales Mental Health Services and Support List. It's a massive list of resources. It includes everything. Some demographics we don't apply to us, like there's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander stuff in there. But it's really good. It's really helpful. It's even got links for like dealing with your parents if they've got a mental illness as well. Next slide, thanks. So formal support. So there are 10 sessions under Medicare to see a psych. I think you can see other mental health professionals, but I know more about psychs, obviously. You'll get a $125 rebate per session. Psychs average between $200 to $300 to $400, depending on your area and the psychologist and what you're going there for. If you are a student, you can kind of get a discount sometimes. It's always worth asking. You need to get a mental health care plan from your doctor. I want to stress that doctors aren't allowed to share the information with anyone. Even if you're under 18, as long as you're over 16, they have to maintain that confidentiality. If you know your doctor might tell your parents, they can lose their license. So it's meant to be really strict, so don't be too worried about that. After your 6th session with the mental health care plan, you do have to go back to your GP for the final 4. They do that to make sure that your treatment is going well, that you like your psychologist, that they're not ripping you off, that the doctor's doing the right thing. It's just to kind of touch base. Some workplaces have something called an EAP, which is an employee assistance program. 5 sessions usually, depending on your workplace, worth checking out as well. You can get more, and they do sometimes give to family and friends as well, depending on the workplace. Then you've got your private health insurance. You might cover some sessions, but always use Medicare first. Cool. Resources, very general. If you search any of them online, you'll find them. There are links here, but you should be able to find them. So you've got Lifeline, which is obvious. That's the one I do. I do the text and chat. Lifeline has text and web chat, and it's got your call 24/7, Beyond Blue men's line as well, targeted to men. Reach Out, which is for kids. It's got weird hours, but after school from Monday to Thursday, and then Friday, middle of the day. I'm not sure why that is. Kids Helpline, they've also got resources for parents and carers and for teachers. So if you've got a child that you're a bit worried about, they've got resources. And Black Dog Institute is really good because they do a lot of research.
They came to my school.
Yeah, they're really good.
They keep bringing them into the survey.
Why would you do that, Noah? You're skewing the results. Sorry, they'll delete him straight away. It's obvious. They have a lot of fact sheets as well. So if you're stressed, for example, they've got some stress fact sheets. Next slide. All right, any final questions? Kind of at the end of it.
Do you think you should also always listen to your emotions?
Yeah, you should feel your I mean, it depends to an extent. If your emotions are telling you that you're not a good person and you deserve to die, no. But if you're having a bad day, have a bad day. Like, that's okay. Sorry, you had a question?
Did you make this?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your help.
Oh, that's
I
fine.
appreciate it.
No, thank you. The slide pack, I've given them credit at the end. That's theirs, so like the backgrounds and stuff, but all the content and the gifts and everything is
Yeah,
all
I
me.
used to have to make slideshows for biology.
Yeah, it's hell, yeah. Yeah, it took me like 10 hours to do, but anyways, that's a different story. All right, any other questions? Anything else?
No one ran away.
No one ran away, yay!
I think we should run this again. It's the same thing because I must say, in front of all of you, people do get scared, and this is not the first wellness one we've done. People get scared, and people feel, oh, no, I'm going to avoid this session.
I don't think they're scared, I think they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's not normal for us to talk about this.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, like you said, Laurena, sometimes you've got to just throw yourself in the deep end. So maybe you've got to do a surprise session of this, only because I wanted to do it straight up. I didn't want to tell anyone about it because I felt this last year you had someone else and it sort of scared off a lot of the girls more than the boys, which I think it's really interesting. We hide. Like, I feel like a lot of us, no one's perfect.
No one's perfect.
I've spoken to Laurena, we're all sort of on this spectrum where everyone's got something. No one's perfect, but if we can all work on each other and work on ourselves, we'll be better people for our families, for our parents.
Definitely.
The way we talk to our parents might change if we resolve our problems, so that everyone's battling and fighting this inner fight.
Yeah, of course.
And sometimes you don't want to tell people, and you know, a lot of people can't approach their parents. Like, my parents, they're old school. Like, I don't think even going to high school, I never went to them and asked or even told them about anything. If I ever had a problem, I just sort of just suck it up.
Yeah, of course.
You never spoke about it, or you probably went to a friend, or you just ignored it because it was not the norm.
Yeah, 100%.
Where now, I think, like, even in my household, I want my kids, if you're feeling down and something's wrong, approach us, tell us, so we can help you.
Yeah.
You know, and we, I think as parents, we see signs that maybe our parents avoided or didn't understand. Like, if I know one of my kids under pressure, I know they won't talk.
Yeah.
And we understand, we know, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Our parents were never like that. We were never given that attention.
Yeah.
Because I think they didn't understand.
They didn't understand.
Priority for them.
Not only do I think they don't understand, they don't want to see it. If you don't want to see something, you actually just won't see it, regardless of how bad the signs are.
Like, they wouldn't know the signs.
They don't know, and they're probably fearful as well. Like, my parents are pretty open-minded and stuff. But even sometimes I'll say stuff and, you know, I'll get a response and I'll think, you guys are open-minded. How would that be your response? But it's a fear as well. You know, you love your kids, you love your family. How could they possibly have depression and I don't know? How could they possibly have anxiety and I don't know? It's scary for some parents as well, especially if they're first-time parents, it's their first kid or something like that. So it can be really daunting and it's really confronting. I think maybe a Banat session, specifically for the girls, you might get more people. They might be more comfortable to open up and to listen to it because it can be a bit confronting. But I appreciate everyone for coming. It's like,